Welcome to DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
It's your boy Andy, and welcome back to the DeFi Slate YouTube channel. Smash the like button on this video, that really helps us out, and sit back and enjoy the content. Thank you very much. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to episode 65 of the DeFi by Design podcast. Here today on Friday, January 28th. And we are going to be talking about the multi-chain world, how you guys can get more active in the multi-chain, how you guys can basically be as efficient and effective in your yield farming, swapping, and what the world kind of looks like, where we're headed, how we're able to use protocols like Li.Finance, which we are here talking with Philip today from, and how we can aggregate all this liquidity on all these chains, to really get the best environment for everybody. We kind of foresee a future of DeFi where you're using an app like Cash App, but you don't understand or realize that on the back end there's all these different protocols and chains and liquidity kind of forming. So excited to kind of learn more about the multi-chain world, how it's shaping up for 2022. Also going to be touching on ETH stuff, so on the roll-up front, and kind of what that looks like as well. So excited to chat here today with Philip. We got connected with Philip through his buddy Henry at ETH Lisbon. So guys, make sure you guys are attending some of these conferences this year because they're dope. Here today, of course, with Robbie. Robbie's in sunny Florida. He's having himself a day. How you doing, Rob?
Yes, sir. It's another beautiful day in Florida. Hanging out. It's Friday, January 28th, and it's looking good. Markets are a bit choppy, but you know what? We're still building. We're in complete build mode. And that's what we're here to talk to Philip about, is kind of what they're building at Li.Finance, and how it connects the entire multi-chain, and it empowers DeFi users to really start navigating the chains more seamlessly and more fluidly. So I'll pass it over to Philip, let him introduce himself, and we'll get right into it.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm super jealous. I'm here in Berlin. It's cold, it's gray, it's rainy, you don't want to leave the house. Looking forward to ETH Denver. As Andy said, check out these conferences. ETH Denver is going to be great. I'm so much looking forward to it. I'm Philip. I'm one of the founders of Li.Finance. LE is for linked finance. We are interlinking the most crucial parts of DeFi, means the DEXes and the bridges. So we are in the core bridge aggregation protocol, aggregating all the cross-chain bridges, Connects, Hop, C-Bridge, AnySwap, Wormhole, all of them, and then we connect them to the DEXes and DEX aggregators on each chain, which is important because the bridges are limited to stable coins and native currencies, and it's so important that we get that whole end-to-end journey, right? You have a certain token on a specific chain A, and you want another token on chain B. You have Cake on BSC, but you want to have Magic on Arbitrum. So with Li.Finance, you can simply use our interface and go there and basically just pick any token you have and swap it into any other token. We figure out the best route. Think of us like 1inch or Paraswap, but cross-chain. And we make all of that tech available as an SDK, as an API for developers. So if you have a dApp and if you're a protocol developer, simply check out our docs. It's well documented, and we provide great support around that development and integration process. And get us integrated, go cross-chain.
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate the Magic show, as that's been the only bag of mine that has done anything in the last 3 weeks, so that's good. They just launched Bridge World. They just launched year-long staking. That thing's going to the moon. Anyways, so let's talk about kind of the process. So I've got, as you said, I've got Cake on BSC, and I want to get the Magic token on Arbitrum. Kind of walk us through what the technical process for that would be, and I'm going to take a stab at it. Find the best bridge with the best rates, find the best aggregator that has the best rate, and then kind of put all those transactions into one and give one gas fee or something like that. But kind of walk us through it more in depth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it depends a little bit. So first of all, it depends on which token you have and which token you want on which chains. And depending on that, we need to choose the right bridge who supports that route. And that's also about how big is your desired swap, right? So we need to check for available liquidity, because as of now, there is not sufficient liquidity for all the different routes on all those bridges. So doing a liquidity check is another thing we have to do. And then obviously we have a couple of ways to compare different bridges based on security factors and based on cost, direct fees, gas fees, how gas efficient the contracts are, and whatever. There's lots of factors, and we try to figure out the best bridge. But as you mentioned, we not only need the bridge, quite often we also need the DEX on the source as well as on the destination chain, because the limited have to pile up huge amounts of liquidity. That's why they are mainly reduced to stable coins and native currencies, and that's why we need swaps on the source and destination chain. And depending on which bridge we are using in between, doing these transactions and swap bridge swap journeys, so to say, is easier or harder to do. And sometimes you have to sign more transactions, sometimes it's just one transaction, totally dependent on the bridge we are able to take, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. And that you mentioned kind of the finding the right bridge aspect. There, there's different criteria there that you look for, sufficient liquidity, as well as some of the security, some of the security measures that you guys take to really secure the bridge from one chain to the next. I'm curious what different types of bridges are out there. And then where does Li.Finance kind of fall into those different types of bridges? I know one of them being one of the types of bridges is a mint and burn bridge, where a token is kind of minted on one side and then it's burned it's kind of burned from the origin chain and it's minted on the destination chain. So you're kind of destroying it and minting it again, almost like the way, I guess, like if you were to teleport from one chain to the next, you would kind of destroy whatever's on the original chain, and then you would mint it over on the next chain. Is that similar to how Li.Finance bridges work, or is there another mechanism that allows you to cross-chain?
So this is the most important differentiation, right? We are not a bridge at all. We don't fall in any of these bridge categories because we are a bridge aggregator. That means all the different bridges, no matter how they work, if they're a mint and burn bridge, or if they're a synthetic asset representation bridge, or if they, light client-based bridge. There's so many types of bridges, and we could have a very long conversation about that. But basically, we aggregate all of them. And we have a default pattern how we prioritize them. So basically, the default pattern we take is security over speed over costs. Basically saying the user is willing to pay for security and speed, right? Because he rather pays a little bit more gas, but then he gets the API, the shiny API sooner, right? That's kind of the idea. So they are willing to pay for UX and security. And the security is a totally different aspect. So, for example, one major differentiation is how trusted or trustless is a bridge. So we have bridges like AnySwap or Wormhole that have an MPC model, right? So multi-party computing. So we have to trust a certain amount of parties here. And then there are much more trustless bridges like Connex on top, and they really care about decentralization. So they have what we have to understand here, the bridges, they always have kind of a man in the middle. There's always someone in the middle that either passes messages from one chain to the other, or checks on both chains. Hey, have the funds been locked, and do we have finality on the source chain? Yes, then unlock on the destination chain. Stuff like that. And this man in the middle system, this is kind of a huge attack vector, right? So that's where we have trust assumptions from the user perspective, and chains, bridges like Connects and Hop, they basically make sure that this man-in-the-middle concept is decentralizable as much as possible. Hop calls them man-in-the-middle system bouncers, Connects calls them routers, and it's very difficult to make that, to incentivize a fair behavior here. So first you need to incentivize liquidity providers to host these man-in-the-middles, and then you need to implement things like staking and slashing, so that people are actually getting hurt if they would misbehave, and they basically, yeah, it's basically like its own small chain, so to say, and that's also why it's very fair for them to launch a token to secure the network. But for us, all of that doesn't really matter. We implement all these bridges, obviously after a certain priority pattern, and not everyone, but we implement most bridges, and then we grade them on a security level. So, for example, the one is MPC, the one is MPC plus proof of authority, which would be wormhole, for example. And then we basically say, hey, probably this is more secure than that. And then there's Connects on top. Oh, they have a decentralizer model. It's trustless. It's not MPC based. Great. Here they are even more secure. And then speed and all of that is also an option. And what we do then is two things. Number one, we create a lot of content around that. So we want to educate our users, our community, and the ecosystem around these bridges and the security factors. At the same time, our platform, as well as our SDK and API, they are very flexible. So we have whitelisting, blacklisting, and preference pattern. So you could basically say, always prefer Connects Hop over the others because they are more trustless. Or depending on your use case, if you have a retail use case and they're only moving a few thousands, right, small amounts, then you're fine with MPC-based models. But if you're a DAO and you're frequently moving like maybe 1 million or more because you have to move large funds, then you probably want to blacklist certain MPC-based bridges and simply say, all right, we just go with the trusted ones, even though they are slower, we go with them, right? And so we educate, we give flexibility, we consult our integration partners, and I do believe this is how we can offer the greatest flexibility and also provide the best, security for the whole ecosystem. That was a long answer.
The users get a choice based on whatever they prefer in terms of their security, speed, and slippage, and so that's something that on the UI that they can adjust. Correct?
Yes, on the UI there is an advanced options menu. You can click on it. You can whitelist this or blacklist certain DEXes and certain bridges. And so right now the current website is very B2C-ish. Soon we're gonna launch for real. So right now we haven't even launched yet. We haven't announced our funding round, nothing, right? So we are over 20 people team already. We have our huge launch quite soon, and then you will see much more all the stuff we do. Yeah.
The UI needs a little bit of work there, buddy.
It's super ugly. It's the hackathon result from last June. No, it's true. Like, I hate it myself. Like, to be honest, but we decided we want to strongly want to focus,
as you know.
Yeah. We want to focus on what's important
on
and
the execution, right?
The tech behind.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
It's
so design comes last.
The tech is there. I remember talking to Henry at the bar, and he was explaining to me, and I was like 4 or 5 drinks deep. I was having a good time, and Henry was telling me the idea, and I was like, I was probably on like 3 or 4 chains at that point. There wasn't really a whole lot of roll-ups out or a whole lot of other chains, but there was still the need, and I was like, wow, this is going to be huge. Like, I think my first question was, yo, can I invest? And he's like, nah, I think we're already closed. And I was like, dude, come on. But yeah, I mean, the way that I see it is, why do I need to spend all this time? Like, I've probably spent so much time, just trying to get stable coins, then trying to bridge, and then taking the stable coins and swapping them on the other DEX, and then getting into the yield farm. I can just take my coin and opt for whichever preference that I want, which would likely be, in order for me, slippage, then security, then speed, and then basically basically just move quickly back and forth with like a click of a button. I mean, that's golden. I've spent way too much time clicking, getting stable coins, finding the best bridge, getting back to stable coins, getting to the DEX. It's just like, it's such a repetitive process. What is the gas fee or the fee that one will pay? Let's just exclude Ethereum from this because nobody uses that shit chain anymore. Who even touches Ethereum anymore? No, I'm kidding. But is the gas fee relatively is it a relatively expensive transaction for say on Avalanche or Phantom or Arbitrum or Metis or whatever it is? Is it a complex transaction on those chains? And how does the fees work for liquidity providers if there are any on Li?
So as we are not a bridge, you can't provide liquidity at Li.Finance, and it is a fairly simply smart contract. Simple in a way that it's just an abstraction of the communication to all these bridges. That means the real heavy stuff is happening on our backend side. That's where we have the most effort, and it's the same for 1inch and Parasol, right? They are running so many servers to get that scalable and fast, and that's the same issue for us. So the smart contract level, we don't add much gas overhead, and we don't take a fee ourselves. So that's the good news. We might do in the future, but in general, we aim to drive the same business model and revenue stream that 1inch and Parasol are having. And that's basically if you are a dApp or if you're an integration partner of any kind and you're integrating us, you can monetize on that. So our SDK is monetizable. And if you take a fee from your users, we're going to take a cut from that. The market standard for that is 15%, but it doesn't concern the user anymore how much we take of that, right? So it basically depends on our integration partners if they want to monetize on that, and we don't have any influence on that.
Yeah, and that
so by using us right now, no
really
additional
easy
fee.
Way. Yeah, exactly. And what that does, that stream, without having a token, which I'm sure we can get into if that's coming or what your thoughts are on that, but that gives something immediately that communities can own a part of without having to have new token emissions. So it's there's already value being created, which is this value is going to be just massive over time. Especially once we get that UI fixed. And that will allow the token holders to have basically a stream of revenue that doesn't rely on new, let's call it leafy tokens to be made, which isn't even in existence yet. And that's huge. Kind of having that product and revenue model before the token even launches. It's something that the community will once get a part of. And we can dive into that now if you like, if you have any thoughts or any alpha leaks that you'd like to share.
So there are no alpha leaks. It's kind of a bit our story. Max and I, we have been building companies for the past 10 years, and there's nothing more satisfying than seeing people using what you're building, right? And so our core focus is to solve a real problem. We wouldn't do any just random fork. It's just we want to solve a problem. That's what satisfies us, and that keeps me motivated to spend long days working. And so we want to solve the problem first. Once you have solved the problem, we still need to adjust the product so that it fits the market you want to serve. And that's our major mission, making our integration partners happy and providing value, right? As a business, you have a value proposition. We want to fulfill that and do that in a way that our integration partners are really happy with us. And if we are at that point, then we can think about a token and let everyone participate. But that comes second or third place. First, let's build something, let's think long term, build something sustainable, and then a token can come, and then we can all have a fun and exciting event. And obviously we want to tie the token to the final product, because it's never final, right? But have a token model that really fits what we do and is in line with all the stakeholders in our product. And there are many, right? We have the bridges, we have the integration partners, we have the team, we have our investors, we have the end users. So there are so many stakeholders we need to take care of if we design tokenomics. It's going to be tough. And there are some great ideas around that. But but yeah, I think a token is basically a whole new product to come up with, to maintain, to market, to message around, right? And we want to wait with this, with that, and until then, stay focused.
Got it. What are some of like the KPIs for y'all now? Like what's some of the growth that you've seen? Let's call it users, transactions, volume. You know, has that been hockey sticking recently? How's that looking?
Yeah, so the North Star metric for us is probably transaction volume. And we haven't tracked it too much. The reason for that is we tried. So the way we kicked things off was without any smart contract. So basically we calculated the best route and we put a lot of effort on the backend side of things. And then all the transactions were triggered in the client side. So it was completely non-custodial, no smart contract, nothing, right? It still is non-custodial. We now have a smart contract. It's even on mainnet, but we just launched it actually yesterday. So silently. And yeah. What we know from bridges we are working with is that we have brought a few millions in transactions monthly, and we have a couple of thousand users. Once we tried tracking on the client side with Google Analytics and stuff, all of that got blocked, very inaccurate numbers. We even did it with a custom domain and all of that, but still. So the proper way to track it would be on our backend side, and it was not a priority to do that right now. But we just know from reference that's been a couple of millions and a couple of thousand users per month for sure. That's what we can see on the server side, server logs, right? Yeah, that gives you a ballpark, but we are getting integrated right now by quite large players. So it's not only, it's not, yeah, it will be a hockey stick quite soon. So looking forward to that.
Sweet. Yeah, I'd like to kind of get back a bit, backtrack to kind of the bridge conversation that we were having. I know that this could go on for hours, but I'd like our audience to kind of understand kind of what bridges really are and kind of the security. So let's just work through a couple, you know, maybe the ones that are up to you. I would love to kind of hear, like, again, I know you could probably talk for hours about this, but perhaps you can name a bridge or two and then kind of give the security model of how it works as you did. And then just kind of like pros and cons, just so that, you know, when our users are using Li as well as other bridges, themselves, they kind of understand like what they're getting into. And the reason behind this is because, again, today there was another bridge hack for like 80 million. On like Quibbita or some like Binance Smart Chain bridge, I think.
Oh, really?
And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of these. Yeah, exactly. So let's just kind of dive into a few of your choice, and then I kind of want to also dive into how you might be preparing for anything like this in the future. I know it's kind of a dark subject, but yeah, let's start with some of the existing bridges and their pros and cons to their model, and just so our community is aware. So go ahead and pick the first one.
Yeah, sure. It always depends a little bit on how trusted a bridge is, right? Like how much do I have to trust someone else with my money? If it's just a few people I have to trust with my money, then basically it's very easy to manipulate these few people, right? It's very easy for me to go there and find a vulnerability and use that vulnerability on all of these people. And it might be, it could also be, you could also, you know, it's not only about technical security, and maybe it's even about social engineering. If you talk from that on, like, just on a human perspective, if you only need to come around 3 people, it's doable. Yeah. First, you try to sneak around them, doesn't work. All right. Then you simply beat them, but one was stronger, so you couldn't beat them all. And then the next is maybe you bribe them. Oh, bribing works, right? Cool. So there are ways to get around this. So the more you decentralize the system, the better. And now we have MPC-based bridges, which only live within their own computing cloud. Let's say AnySwap. I think AnySwap has around 30 servers or something like that. And it's probably all within their own AWS account, which is fine. But if there is any chance to dive into that, right? Send a malicious email to someone of the team, and it gets opened, and you are into the system. It's not that hard to have an undetected virus or undetected Trojan horse, right? Like, these things are like, if you're in that security space, like, it's easy. If you have one particular target, it's doable, right? And so this is one thing. And then we have bridges like Wormhole. They also have an MPC model like AnySwap, but they have another model on top. They call it proof of authority. So they have basically say, we have a certain amount of people which we should trust because they have a large reputation. It's their validators. I think they have 19 validators, which is basically players like Chorus One and Lido and so on. Like I think staking providers they are using mainly for the validators. And yeah, this again, like, if there's a vulnerability, I only need to figure out these 19 players, and I can easily go through that as well. And it might work for a certain amount of time, but at scale, and if the incentive is large enough, some solid hackers, because no system is safe. That's also something, no system is safe. That's a ground rule. And that's also something which is in general something I'm criticizing about that bridge industry. Everyone is talking about audits. No one is talking about pen tests. So pen testing is a process whereby you let a security expert hack your server. And then there's black box pen testing. So basically they don't know anything about your server, right? And then they try to hack it with all the security know-how. So basically you basically pay a hacker to hack your system. And then there is white box pen testing, whereby you give him all the information and you give him code access, and he can really, has the full freedom to search for vulnerabilities. That's what you do at the next step. No one is talking about that. No one is doing that, but that's what you're supposed to do. And there are always, I bet you could even run some port scanners, and you would find open ones at some of those bridges. And then we have bridges like Allbridge, which is then basically, I think, just one centralized server. And that hacker that got access, he doesn't have to use that open door directly, right? He simply waits for that one large transaction of 2 million and redirects the route, redirects the transfer to his own wallet, and he's like, thanks, I'm rich now. And we're going to see that quite often. Quite sure. And so the most secure bridges...
I've been seeing a lot of... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, the most secure bridges are the ones that care about decentralization and trustlessness. And on the token bridge level, we have players like Connex and Hop. On the arbitrary data messaging bridges, which is a really important feature. Wormhole supports that. Cbridge now supports that as well, right? But on the arbitrary data messaging bridge, it's basically Nomad, it's a fork from Optics. James Presswich is a candidate you have to take a look into. He's been on a lot of talks about why bridges are burning. Check it out on YouTube. You can learn a lot from him. And these guys really care about trustlessness. So for them, it took years to build a solid, trustless, decentralizable system. And they are slower, they have drawbacks. There's another great article from Arjun Bhuptani, from one of the founders of Connext. It's called the Interoperability Trilemma. So you always have to make certain trade-offs. You can't get it all. And these guys are simply picking the trade-offs for greater security. And in the long run, I'm quite sure that these bridges are going to make it. And we are seeing over 50 different bridges in the space right now. 46 are shitty, to be honest. Just from a security, they have a different. So I'm not even saying that they're doing a bad job. It's simply that they have a different target group. They focus on retail, on small transactions, and you always have to decide. So from where on do I need to put an extra amount of security? Or it's not even that. They're basically saying, hey, we're going to start this as a business. So we started lean. So we first take care of go-to-market, branding, growing, and then we take care of security. And I think that's even on any SOP's roadmap. So they are also taking huge care. So they're also caring about security. All of them care about security. Don't get me wrong. But the question is always, what's the priority of that? And one of the best bridge designs, obviously, also the new one.
Yeah. What was that last part you mentioned about the kind of the interoperability trilemma, and how there's quite a few different bridge options and frameworks that are out there. What are some of the I guess first, could you unpack this interoperability trilemma and describe how Li.Finance is dealing with some of these trade-offs, and then I guess how some of these other poorer bridges are handling these trade-offs, and what's the reason for Li.Finance kind of taking the route that it did?
Yeah, to unpack it completely is maybe too much, but there's basically speed and costs, and there is security, and then there's also generalizability. So how flexible is the system, and all of that. So how do we deal with that? It's difficult to say, because these bridges decide on their own what's important to them, and we let our integration partners choose what's important to them, right? So we are basically inheriting the best parts, but also the worst parts of all these bridges. So if they get a new feature, we get it. If they have a new security model, we are inheriting that. So the only thing we can do is stay up to date, continuously learn about these new changes and concepts, and what we try to offer is basically certain thresholds for certain things. So we try to make things quantifiable. For example, the topic decentralization. We could basically try to track how decentralized is Hop and how decentralized is Connects by seeing how many man-in-the-middle players do they have roll out already, and thereby their security increases by the more decentralized they are. And these are the things we can do, right? So we can learn about their concepts, and we can then basically say, all right, is it NPC based? Okay, less secure than XY. So there's basically a point system. If you're NPC based, you get less points. If it's proof of authority, it's less points than a completely trusted system. And then when you're trustless, okay, what's the degree of decentralization? So there are qualitative and quantitative factors we can take into account, and that's how we deal with these trade-offs. And then we basically let you as the integration partner or you as the end user decide what is important to you, and that's how we deal with it. We pass it on. So we educate, we give the flexibility, but in the end you decide. But because we don't want to prevent you from taking the fastest, most insecure bridge to get your 1K you still have left and not deployed in any protocol, get it over as fast as possible, get that APY, right? If you want that, it's fine. It's totally understandable. So we don't want to be like, well, we're going to take the most secure bridge. It takes you 3 hours. We just going to take that one. It's a little risky, but you're going to get there fast, right? Yeah.
And sometimes that's exactly what users want. I mean, things are freshly launched. Got to get in first hour, first 2 hours. Yeah. I mean,
we do a lot in the
so far. This conversation has made me want to. Yeah. And I hope you guys do some stuff on the revoking permissions, because that's what I've seen a lot. People get wrecked on with bridges, is basically allowing them to drain the wallet because their permissions are open. But I'm pretty sure if you have your MetaMask connected to a hardware wallet, they can't drain your wallet because you have to physically approve of the drain. So I'm pretty sure anybody uses a bridge, and I'm saying pretty sure because I could use some confirmation here. But as long as you're not using just a hot wallet on any of these bridges, you shouldn't have to revoke the permissions. But I guess I could be wrong. I guess they could figure it out somehow, but I don't think that they could. So I've seen a lot of FUD about that, but I think it mostly affects users who just use hot wallets.
To be honest, I can't give an answer to that. And even though I'm dealing with bridges all day long, I haven't spent too much time in the past weeks caring about these hacks. Our researchers do that right now, and they basically pass this information on to our developers, and we do a lot of things on our end. For example, kill switches. So we'll allow bridge builders to pull the trigger themselves if they encounter a hack. Basically, one of their wallet addresses is registered with our smart contract, and they can disable it on the smart contract level. But also, we have like easy switches where we can turn off certain bridges for all our integration partners at once, because we have that central. That's what where a centralized backend is nice, right? Because we can simply we disable it with one small signature, and that's it. And same for that was going to be able on smart contract level as well as on backend level. And these are the things we can do as soon as we are aware of something. And even one step further, if we get developers to a point where they can basically pull the trigger themselves if they counter a hack, I think that's the most important part here. Yeah, we're working on a concept which you can share with other bridge builders and aggregators as well.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something to keep in mind. But like I said, as long as you're using hardware wallet, it should be okay. And again, using these secure bridges is the answer. For the most part. And I mean, I think Vitalik made a comment. He was saying multi-chain, but not cross-chain. Now, I don't really have the context on that, but I assume he means we exist in a multi-chain world. However, likely not cross-chain in terms of, I guess, things like swaps. That could potentially go against the idea of Li.Finance. But I think he more so meant like interacting with multiple chains at once, less so kind of going from one chain to another. I don't know. What do you think about the idea of multi-chain but not cross-chain?
Yeah, basically the question of will we have a multi-chain world? I strongly believe so. I think that we're going to have blockchains for different use cases. We're going to have private chains. We're going to have, that's one thing that's for sure for me. And as we are talking about the market, so there will be bridges because people want to move assets from one chain to the other. Let's say we make it to replace fiat, and then especially, so there needs to be a way. Then the question is, will protocols like Yearn drive their strategies cross-chain, right? That's the question here. Like, will Yearn have cross-chain vault strategies? Difficult to say. I believe that in a very fragmented multi-chain world, there will be enough financial incentive to build these protocols, and that means they're going to be part of the core infrastructure. It's kind of hard to predict. I can see his thoughts. At the same time, I would simply say in the next years it will matter. And people will jump on the bandwagon when they see the opportunity. Oh, there's something working cross-chain. We're going to see multi-chain token governance models. We're going to change all that stuff. I think there's a huge episode where we will see multi-chain and cross-chain strategies, behaviors, and dApps, and maybe even use cases we haven't seen yet. Maybe there's a complete new layer that has to be built in order to make that new financial system we are all dreaming of and we are all building right now to make it work, right? So I don't think that this is a black and white answer. We're gonna see interoperability happening, and there are also great protocols like IBC that would make that possible in a safe way. Just very complex, but solid. So there's a lot to it. So I would not ultimately agree.
Yeah, potentially a layer of abstraction one further from the aggregation layer, where people start to kind of interact with different chains, but unknowingly. So it's kind of maybe it's a game layer, and there's like some collaboration between some different NFT projects, and you can kind of cross-chain without actually digging into some of the different bridges that are required to go between these different game universes, if you will, or DeFi universes. I think my understanding of where Vitalik was coming from was the security assumptions that are baked into these bridges, and how it's a bit of a systemic risk to have these bridge security assumptions. Because I guess the real risk being is by having connectivity between these different chains in a system where each chain kind of relies on another. If there's a bridge transaction and one chain, that transaction goes through, but on the other, for instance, there's some blockage, there's some resistance, and the transaction doesn't fully confirm. If that transaction was happening on the same chain, there would be a solution. You could roll back the chain, and the transactions would be reverted. But for instance, if you have it on one chain and you roll back transactions on the other chain, but you don't do that on both chains, well, now you're stuck in this format where the transaction went through on one side, but it didn't go through on the other, and you're in two like parallel different scenarios with a transaction that doesn't align between the two. And to me, this was a kind of justification for modular blockchains, because you want all these different pieces to fit together and work together well, but you don't want the security assumptions of one chain to affect the other. To me, that's kind of the reasoning for a modular blockchain, is so that these different modules can plug into each other, but if one of them breaks, there's not a systemic risk of that breakage impacting the rest of the chains.
That's absolutely true. So there are multiple stories to that. Let's start with the bridges one, right? Regarding the bridges, there are bridges that basically mint and burn their own asset representations. And if they mint and burn their own official asset representations for someone else, and if they don't leave the door open for other bridges to mint the very same asset representation, then we basically have a vendor lock-in. And if that asset is then heavily used on the destination chain, but the bridges collapse, for whatever reason gets hacked, then we are basically reducing the security of the whole system, of that whole ecosystem, of the few billions within that protocol. We reduce this to the security model of the bridge, instead of having the supposed to be their security, which is given by the blockchain itself, which has been developed over 5-6 years, and that's one thing with the bridges. I absolutely agree, and that's for example why Uniswap or multichain now, as they rebranded, they got a lot of critics around that in the past weeks. And people have been trying up to come with a memorandum, as Sealer, like Seabridge, released one on their blog. But yeah, that is something we still have a find a solution around that. Nomad is trying to create an open standard when it comes to burning and minting asset representations on certain chains. So Nomad tries to create that open standard. So there are projects that are taking care of that already. But I can also see that while Vitalik is totally right on these things, is that there are going to be players to mitigate this. So if there is a major reorg or whatever and transactions don't go through, or if there is anything happens so that chain doesn't accept the transaction that has already found finality on the source chain, that there might be insurance protocols and basically technical buffers in between that are basically buffering and taking track of all these transactions, and then they resubmit them. Should that rare instance happen, or should that instance happen whereby something was not accepted, then there's this insurance protocol that resubmits these transactions. I see these things coming up. That's how the market works. So I don't believe that all of that is ending up in that idealistic way we all would wish for to happen. That's simply not how the market works, and that's what I believe is much more likely. Does make sense? Because
does this tap into the conversation around data availability? And I know we have just a few minutes left, so that's a whole a topic we could have a whole nother conversation on. I guess as you were describing the finality of a transaction on one chain. And the potential issue if that same transaction doesn't find finality on a different chain, it kind of leads me to believe that Ethereum could be this complete, comprehensive chain that tracks the finality of really the entire ecosystem. And to me, that represents almost a monolithic approach. Everything has to be has to reach finality on Ethereum to kind of achieve consensus. Does the openness of a data availability layer kind of remove the need of Ethereum to be this underlying consensus layer and allow these modules to connect to one another without requiring a consistent layer of execution?
Yeah, I think we are mixing two topics here a little bit, because Ethereum being the final settlement layer, so to say, right? Like for endless data persistence, this is something that I can definitely see. But still, there might be that issue where we have two L2s and we found finality on the source chain, but we didn't get it on the destination chain, and now we have the transaction and it's somehow in space, right? We have a problem because that person locked funds on the source chain, and there needs then another data availability layer that is cheap enough that he can transmit these transactions, and before it found finality here and there, it wouldn't have found finality on the underlying settlement layer as well, right? So the settlement layer doesn't know of that transaction. So we are talking about two different problems here. So there still is room for that data layer that watches the space, that watches what is happening between these different bridges and so on. But yeah, then again, these bridges are probably not open enough. So we're gonna have, it's a huge mess. It's a huge problem. But it's basically market demand versus idealistic technical systems. What we're probably going to see is that if DeFi works out, we will end up with another system that's better than the old one, but it's not the final version. We are doing a lot of things better than in the past, but we will fall back to it's also in regard of compliance. Now everything is trustless, permissionless, all of that, right? It's changing. Things are more trusted. Things are more permissioned, because now it's about credit. So we need a credit history, a credit score at some point. Like, do we need this? Maybe not. But maybe there are some use cases where we need this. There is a reason why we have these systems in place, why we have insurances, why we have compliance. It's about keeping consumers safe. That's what regulations are for often. It's also to make so that the state can earn money and get taxes. But that also has a solid reason, because they are building streets. They're also messing up a lot of stuff, but that's with any company and any person. So that's totally human that we mess things up. So this is a very philosophical thing here right now, but I do believe that DeFi is super great, and we will change a lot in this world. but then ultimately the technical setup we come out with in the end will not be optimal. But it's going to be better than the old one. That's great. And then we can start from scratch, another revolution. Maybe we will see it. Maybe not. Maybe we will not see it anymore.
It's like the vision of DeFi, the grand vision. There's a lot of layers to it. We're like in the earlier stages here, where we're just trying to get something stable, if you will. Just get the building blocks, and then 20, 30 years down the line, we're talking, like you're saying, like a full blown system. But it never really ends. There's always going to be iterations, because as long as this game stays around, it becomes an infinite game where younger people, even Rob and I's kids, when we're in our 30s or whatever, we'll be playing the infinite game. So like the amount of iterations are kind of mind-boggling what's possible. It's definitely interesting, man. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and vision and your work so far with Li.Finance, and excited to get on there and use that much more often when conducting bridge transactions. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. It was a fun conversation.
It was great, man. Yeah, real quick before you go, one last question. We ask pretty much everyone who comes on the podcast, if you were to pitch DeFi, Li.Finance to anyone in the world, who would you choose and why?
To whom? Oh, to pick one person to pitch this to? One person or one company?
Yeah, DeFi, crypto, Web3, the multi-chain.
Difficult.
Who do you choose?
I already did that. I wanted to pitch. I would have chosen MetaMask, but we already pitched it to them, and because I believe the largest wallets, the largest centralized exchanges, all of them could make use of our infrastructure, and so that's why we're basically saying, hey. Yeah, and we're in touch with all of them. So we talk to all of them, and it's super exciting for us, super exciting stage. We could potentially make the whole ecosystem so much stable. Yeah, no clear answer. I would love to pitch it to Vitalik, just up for the challenge and getting his feedback. Yeah, I'll probably choose Vitalik. I highly respect him, such a bright guy, and I choose Vitalik. Vitalik.
Awesome. Yeah. Wallets are a great integration partner, and Vitalik is, he's a great spokesperson for the multi-chain and the whole Web3 ecosystem. It was awesome having you on, man, and keep on building, and looking forward to using Li.Finance here to navigate these different chains.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.